5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni Viewer, and welcome to Genre Bender's Obscurities and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. Today is the Chinese New Year, so I'll be commemorating it with a film that takes place over the course of that holiday. Our subject is Flower Drum Song, the film adaptation of the Broadway musical adaptation of the original book, all of which still stand out to this very day. Mei Li and her father, Dr. Han Li, have successfully snuck into San Francisco by stowing away aboard a cargo ship. They're here because a marriage has been arranged between Mei and nightclub owner Sammy Fong, and this was the only way they could think of to get in before Mei is too old. Sammy, however, is involved with his leading showgirl Linda Lo, and he's already got enough trouble committing to that relationship, so he pawns the Lis off on the Wangs, a wealthy family in Chinatown whose elder, Wang Qiyang, clings to his Chinese heritage even as his children and sister-in-law embrace American culture. Mei Li might be a perfect match for Wang Qiyang's oldest son, Wang Ta, and although the elder Wang approves of this union, Ta has recently gotten involved with Linda, unaware of her risque profession or her involvement with Sammy. What's more, Ta has also caught the eye of his friend, seamstress Helen Chow, though he's totally oblivious to that. The ultimate question is whether the right people will end up together or not. Perhaps I ought to explain where this show came from before we get too far. In 1957, Chinese-American author C.Y. Lee published his first novel entitled The Flower Drum Song, a dramatic tale about an immigrant's journey from resisting to accepting his American citizenship. The book did amazingly well, being the first book by an Asian-American author to receive widespread attention and accolades. It wasn't long before he got 2 offers to adapt the novel. The first was from a company that would adapt it to TV, an offer that would pay handsomely up front, but Lee would give up all rights to future revenue if it succeeded. The second was from the famed Broadway duo Rodgers and Hammerstein to make a stage musical, which would not pay as much up front but would result in lifelong residuals if it succeeded. Lee got drunk the night he got those offers, and woke up the next morning surprised to learn that he had accepted the Broadway offer during his binge. Thank God he did, too, because going to Broadway was absolutely the right choice. Without it, the book might have faded into obscurity. Well, possibly. I mean, we can't prove it, but, you know, there's a chance. Now, the play and its film adaptation are not direct adaptations of the book. Most notably, they turn the story into a comedic ensemble piece as opposed to a drama. This means some of the harsher elements of the book are only alluded to, and the overall tone is much lighter, and I can already predict that some people might take umbrage with that choice. After all, isn't a shift from drama to comedy a bit disrespectful to C.Y. Lee's vision? Well, that's a question of attitude, is it not? It most certainly is. The important thing to remember here is that the genre shift is not disrespectful to the novel. If the humor was done in a way that mocked the characters for being Chinese, playing up stereotypes and depicting them as other to the majority population of America, that would be disrespectful. It's not what the musical does, though. The comedy instead arises from the situations, interactions, and domestic conflicts. Essentially, this is a sitcom, and like any sitcom, it encourages the audience to laugh not at the characters, but at the issues of everyday life that anyone can face. Of course, the show doesn't shy away from being dramatic when it's appropriate. Moments of heartbreak are never made light of, with no subversions or ill-timed quips that detract from the drama. There is a delineation between moments of levity, moments of sadness, moments of tension, and moments of relief. Besides, C.Y. Lee also likes this adaptation, and you would think if anyone would take umbrage with the changes, it would be him. Part of why the show is successful in balancing these tones is through the complexity of its characters. You see, Flower Drum Song has plenty of conflict, but it doesn't really have an antagonist. There is no single character going around spreading discord among the cast, because there's no need for one. Throughout the runtime, any of the characters can be virtuous or devious depending on the scenario, but never in a good versus evil sort of way. Linda Lo, for example, is trying to insert herself into the Wang family while lying about her personal life and profession, which is certainly not good behavior. Then again, she's doing this because she's sick of waiting for Sammy to stop dragging his feet and propose to her. Slow as he is, Sammy does love Linda and wants to marry her, which makes his arranged marriage to Mei Li an issue. His initial move to send the Lees to the Wang household is initially a selfish move just to get them out of his hair, though it luckily works out that Mei and Ta fall for each other by the end. Meanwhile, Ta's conflict with his father Qi Yang is one of generations, wherein the traditions and the new ways are neither wholly right nor wholly wrong. The best outcome can only be achieved by melding the two. Qi Yang is correct to pick Mei Li as his son's bride, but Ta still has to fall in love with her naturally, as Americans do, for them to be happy together. As a result, there's no need for a Niago or a Don John to step in and stir the pot. The characters are capable of generating all of the conflict entirely by themselves and still come out being likable by the end. What makes this even more impressive is that a show this complex was achieved with a cast of characters who had never gotten media like this in America before. Like I said, the original book was the first by an Asian American author to receive accolades, and the same goes for the Broadway play and its film adaptation. Bear in mind, this show debuted in the early 1960s. This was a point where the entertainment industry would usually only cast Asian actors as the villains in World War II dramas. In fact, yellowface was still commonly practiced at the time, where white actors would be cast to play Asian characters in makeup, and those were rarely flattering depictions. Technically speaking, there was no reason for either the play or the film to cast Asian performers, especially since there were so few at the time who were headliners.
And yet, that's precisely what was done.
Indeed, which provided opportunities for a lot of Asian American actors who otherwise might not have had a shot. Granted, the movie still has one instance of yellowface with the character of Madame Liang, played by Juanita Hall, who was half black and half Irish, yet she's portraying a natural-born Chinese woman. Okay, so the cast technically isn't 100% Asian American. In fact, the remaining 99% isn't 100% authentic Asian American either. In both the play and the film, the cast contains a wide variety of Asian heritages. The characters are of Chinese descent, but the cast contains not only Chinese, but also Japanese and even Philippine actors. In modern times, the film in particular has come under fire for that. Now, on the one hand, I get what's being said here. There is a difference between Chinese and Japanese and Korean and what have you, and those differences matter, especially to the people with those respective heritages. Ideally, a show about Chinese American characters would be cast entirely with Chinese American actors. I understand that. But on the other hand, as mentioned, this was a time when they didn't even have the obligation to cast Asian American actors. They could have just cast white actors in makeup, but they didn't. And that's where I think the focus ought to lie. Condemning Flower Drum Song for not being 100% authentic takes away from the fact that it chose to go for authenticity in any capacity. Maybe that just makes it one step on the road instead of the final destination, but it is still a step, and a big one at that.
Besides, you could say the mixture of Asian ethnicities speaks to how this is a very American story.
Very true. Flower Drum Song may be about people of Asian heritage, but it's a very American story, because only in America could you find this variety of people all in one place. You have immigrants, both legal and illegal, some of whom hold on to their traditions while others blend the old with the new. Then, of course, you have a generation that was born and raised in the new culture, and they embrace those norms while seeing little value in what came before. The show even makes a distinction between Chinese and Chinese American early on. When the Lees arrive in Frisco, they initially have a hard time finding their way because the address they have written down is in Chinese characters, and even a local Chinatown cop can't make out what it says. Sammy Fong has also embraced the American lifestyle, even having a disagreement with the Lees about what constitutes Chinese food. Linda is also very American in her ways. Far from being a demure, submissive, modest lady, she's a fast-moving, assertive, wild girl who flaunts her looks and loves being the center of attention. In short, she's the polar opposite of the ultra-traditional May, although that doesn't make her a bad person. She's just an American girl through and through. Likewise, May is not bad for being traditional, she's Chinese through and through, and that's just as she ought to be. Again, we see that there's nothing degrading about these depictions. Neither Chinese culture nor American culture is shown to be inferior to the other. Instead, they have their ups and their downs, and the key to attaining a happy ending is to strike a balance, for the yin and the yang to coexist, if you will.
Before you get back to the deeper analysis, can we take a moment to talk about how beautiful this movie is?
We most certainly can, because it's just as much a feast for the eyes as the ears. Maybe it's just because Snazzy and I have a fondness for the past, but we think the aesthetics of Flower Drum Song are great. City shots are filled with stylish cars, the kind they just don't make anymore. Seriously, why did tail fins ever go out of style? They just look so good. Costumes are also great, whether they be sharp American suits or traditional Chinese dresses. The architecture of the sets and objects found within are also lovely, especially the Wang family garden and Qi Yang's bed frame. I want a bed like that. Heck, I don't know anyone who wouldn't want a bed like that. We also get two dream ballets with very different visual styles, one that's more dramatic and another that's more comedic, but they both work well for their respective segments. I really wish the world still looked like this. Plus, ethnicities aside, nobody gives a bad performance here. The whole cast brought their A-games to this picture, and it shows in every frame. My personal favorite of the bunch is Jack Sue as Sammy Fong, who has a Sinatra-esque ease to his performance. I swear he could have been part of the Rat Pack if he'd been given more of a chance by the industry. Anyway, I think it's clear by now that I love this movie. But it turns out not everyone does. As alluded to in my earlier bit about the casting, Flower Drum Song has its fans, but it's also considered problematic in some circles. I've heard the arguments, and I have to say that the critiques often feel like nitpicks, or they only work when you remove context. These arguments can be found, of all places, on the behind the scenes of the DVD. So if you think I'm making any of them up, you can track a copy down for yourself and see that I'm not. So where to begin? Well, for starters, there are certain turns of phrase that have Chinese elements added into them that make them sound unnatural, like this one.
The old man sure left you with egg foo young on your face.
Now, yes, those lines exist, but they are few and far between, so I don't think it's right to blow them out of proportion. Similarly, Wang Qiyang doesn't trust the banks and refuses to keep his money there. Sure, that's considered an Asian stereotype, but here it's shown to be a character trait, an extension of Qiyang's refusal to embrace Western culture, so it's not like this was thrown in just to be a stereotype. Then there are those couple of songs that the so-called scholars take umbrage with. Grant Avenue is sometimes chastised for having quote-unquote touristy lyrics, sounding like it's advertising a visit to Chinatown to outsiders rather than being spoken by a resident. This critique seems to rely on how the song is sung in second person, relaying information to the audience about the location. Alright, I agree, Grant Avenue is written that way, but that hardly makes the song unique. The title song of Holiday Inn is also sung in second person, as is the majority of Skid Row from Little Shop of Horrors. They both relay information about the location to the audience, yet never get called problematic for doing so. And if you think that's a false equivalency because those songs are about fictional locations, the same can't be said for New York, New York from On the Town. That's about a very real location, and it's also written in second person in a very touristy way, yet it's not framed as being in poor taste for it. Sounds to me like the song is only being targeted because people are looking for something to complain about. If it's not a problem with other such songs, it shouldn't be a problem here. Then there's Chop Suey, which is even more infamous. After all, Chop Suey the dish is about as Chinese as baseball and apple pie, so getting a bunch of Asian actors to sing and dance to such a song must be the height of demeaning, right? Well, not necessarily. Do you remember the song Baby It's Cold Outside?
That's the song that got canceled a few years ago because people thought it was creepy, but once you hear it in the original context, it's actually just playful mutual flirtation, right?
Exactly, and this song needs to be treated the same way. You see, if you take it out of context, then sure, Chop Suey can be argued as problematic. But if you put it back into context, you realize it harkens back to the cultural celebration at the heart of this show. Qi Yang says, somewhat sarcastically, that liang is like that dish the Americans made up that just has a bunch of ingredients all mixed together, that being Chop Suey. Liang doesn't take that as a slight, but instead takes pride in it, and the song itself proceeds to celebrate dual heritage. It isn't about humiliation, it's about celebration. How could anyone object to that? Now look, I realize that I myself am not Asian American, and I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on any Asian culture. But I do believe that good storytelling is universal. And Flower Drum Song, as far as I'm concerned, is an example of good storytelling. The critiques I've addressed are either very minor or require proper context to understand and a removal of context to make them seem bad. Hence why I've spent so much time dwelling on them.
You know, some people might chastise it for not living up to modern standards, but I think the fact that Flower Drum Song still remains so singular in this day and age says a lot in itself.
Ah, yes. May as well talk about what happened to the show in more recent history.
As I've hopefully made clear by now, the original play and its film adaptation are held in mixed regard in modern times. Plenty of people love them, but the louder voices consider them problematic for one reason or another. In 2002, playwright David Henry Hwang attempted to revive the show by way of completely rewriting it. His new version retains most of the music, but it attempts to incorporate more elements from the original book and include various original alterations to make it more politically correct.
Wait, he made it PC? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh is right.
Despite some initially good reception in other cities, the show bombed when it finally got to Broadway, and it closed down after only a few weeks. Since then, Flower Drum Song has been in a state of limbo in the theatrical world. Both shows are available to license, but choosing one is a catch-22. If you license the original, you get canceled for being offensive, but if you license the revival, you lose general audiences who prefer the original. As such, the show rarely sees the light of day anymore, and nothing has arisen to take its place. No time for that when Back to the Future can be adapted to the stage. That's what the world really needs. I guess.
Look, I mean no disrespect to David Henry Hwang. Even if there's a chance I'm mispronouncing his last name, please don't take it personally. I do that with a lot of people. It's not intentional. I do believe that he had good intentions with trying to revive the show the way he did. That being said, I can't help but think of that old saying that if something isn't broken, don't fix it.
I don't believe the show was ever broken, and knowing how badly the revival failed only reinforces that belief. It just serves as yet another reminder of how updating something for a modern audience doesn't work out in the long run, and that the classics need to be left alone.
And yes, I do believe that Flower Drum Song is a good show. Since the theatrical version is up in the air at this point, I recommend checking out the original movie and appreciating it for the fun musical romp it is. And heck, check out the original book too, it's still in print. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer wishing you all a happy Chinese New Year.
Some of the actors were overdubbed by white singers, right? How would you respond to someone saying that's offensive?
I would say that Flower Drum Song is not unique in that regard. Heck, in The Greatest Showman, Rebecca Ferguson's voice was overdubbed when she was singing, but nobody called it problematic there. The only way you could view it as problematic here is specifically because the actors in question aren't white, which, if you think about it, is kind of ironic.
Interesting reply. Guess we'll see if other people accept it.
Yes, I suppose we shall.
Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.